Hello and welcome to WMT Reviews. I am Wiseman Tanofsky. Now, in all of Disney, there is a character that stands out as one of the most diabolical, the most evil, the most despicable, and the most enjoyable villains to ever terrorize the world of cinema. A scoundrel who enjoys being evil so much that it can't help but flicker through in their performance with a snicker of glee and a wild grin. That villain is Professor Rattigan from Basil the Great Mouse Detective, but if I had to choose a second to fit that description, it would be the mistress of all evil, Maleficent, the horned sorceress, whose malevolent presence and soothing, sinister tone cast an unmistakable shadow of evil over the Sleeping Beauty animated movie. But just who was this deliciously evil villainess? Why was she so bitter, so twisted, so darn mean? Cursing a newborn baby simply because she wasn't invited to a christening. That's a bit hardcore, even for the mistress of all evil. As luck would have it, Disney was ready with an answer to the question that a handful of fans wanted to ask, and did so in full with the 2014 live-action feature Maleficent, starring Angelina Jolie in the title role, a film that promised to not only show the origins of Disney's most iconic villainess, but to tell the story of Sleeping Beauty in a new world and grittier fashion. Now, we'd seen this before with Universal Pictures' darker take on Snow White, with Snow White and the Huntsman in 2012, starring Kristen Stewart, and Thor star Chris Hemsworth in their respective title roles. The film received mixed reviews and a critical response with a resoundingly negative undertone, scores ranging from 48% on Rotten Tomatoes to 6.2 on IMDb. Was this in reaction to a darker take on a charming children's story, or simply the traditional reflex towards seeing Kristen Stewart in, well, anything? Only another dark fairy tale movie would tell for sure. And so without further ado, let's jump into Maleficent. Now, before we get started, as usual, boring disclaimer alert, this review will contain spoilers and an opinion, so if either of these things bother you, feel free to go find them somewhere else. Okay, let's move on. We're introduced to the young Maleficent at a very early age, a powerful fairy living on the moors of an unknown kingdom surrounded by dozens of magical creatures and some truly stunning visuals. Though, this did provide me with my first, okay, moment. Because I always assumed that a name like Maleficent, being so indicative of the word malevolent, implied that she was always evil, or that it wasn't her name to start with and it was bestowed upon her following her fall to the dark side. But moving on, Maleficent shows off her magnificent wings soaring around in her carefree environment, letting us know she's a nice little girl by politely interacting with all she comes across. This is brought to an abrupt stop when word reaches her that a human thief has been apprehended, and it's here that she meets the young boy named Stefan, whose name is instantly recognisable as that of the king from the original animated movie. The plot thickens. It's here that an important plot point is covered, the fact that iron burns fairy skin. Make sure you've got that, because it's important and there'll be a test later. We're taken on a brief journey of their time together growing up, in spite of the fact that the human kingdom and the creatures of the moors are involved in some petty conflict that's never really explained as anything more than just the evil human race wanting to control all it surveys again. As Maleficent and Stefan grow older, thankfully evolving into older and better actors as they go, their friendship evolves into something more, and the two begin to fall in love, culminating in Stefan giving Maleficent the gift of true love's kiss on her 16th birthday. After time, however, Stefan's ambition to be king draws him away from the moors and back to his own people, and he stops visiting. Which is silly timing, really, because Maleficent is played at last by Angelina Jolie in the following scene. See what you're missing out on now, Stefan? Silly boy. It's at this time that the human king, again for no other reason other than because he can, moves for a full invasion of the moors, an invasion that's seen off more or less single-handedly by the powerful Maleficent. Okay, mostly single-handedly. There were some tree people pottering around and a scary-ass tree dragon-like thing, but she humiliates the king and sends him running with his tail between his legs. The king doesn't take his butt-kicking too well, and on his deathbed, against all the laws of rightful inheritance in the history of the concept of a monarchy, he offers the throne to the first man who can bring Maleficent down. Now, I'm going to take a brief moment here to talk about Jolie as Maleficent. Now, her first few lines on the battlefield were all shouted, and any film goer will know that Angelina can't really mix shouting with acting all that well, so her lines come out almost as wooden as the army she's commanding. But from that point on, I have to say the casting was perfect. She has that joyful gleam in her eye whenever she's doing something evil. Her tone is soothing and foreboding, just like Eleanor Audley's portrayal in the original movie. Her costumes are all fantastic and seem to emulate her mood, as though they're not clothing at all. They're just extensions of her personality, from the light-hearted and earthy browns when she's in her comfortable surroundings, to the chilling sheer black robes that she dons in the iconic cursing scene. Stefan visits Maleficent that evening, and as though it were yesterday, the two begin to fall in love once more. Or at least Maleficent falls for him. Stefan, however, seems to drug her and attempts to kill her later that night. But for whatever reason, he can't bring himself to do it. Perhaps he does still love her. However, the allure of the throne is for some reason more appealing to him, and he decides to compromise, using an iron chain to carve off Maleficent's wings and take them back to the king as proof of her supposed demise. Maleficent awakes to find both Stefan and her wings gone, and she lets out a truly heart-wrenching scream. She's devastated, she's heartbroken, she's alone in the dark, and this scene came dangerously close to drawing a single man-tear from my eye. Now, I should point out at this moment that this wasn't initially what I wanted. Part of me didn't want them to try and make me sympathise with the mistress of all evil. I've always seen Maleficent, as I said earlier, as a villain who was evil simply because she enjoyed it. She liked being bad. And that was all I needed. But I have to say, I took that back because of this scene. To fall in love with someone and then have them hurt you is bad enough. But to learn to trust and even love them again, only to have them outright betray you like this, yeah. You know what? That would destroy anyone and drive even the nicest person to evil. So yeah, the film surprised me at this point. Maleficent eventually finds the strength to stand, forming her iconic staff with her powers and limping away. And while Stefan is indeed named king as promised, Maleficent proclaims herself Queen of the Moors, almost in spiteful retaliation. The Moors are surrounded by a wall of thorns. She crafts herself a new throne in the heart of her new land, and the new queen rescues a crow named Diaval from a human farmer by turning the bird into a man and scaring the living daylights out of the farmer. In payment of this debt, Diaval swears himself to Maleficent, becoming the trusted winged companion that was also portrayed in the animated original. And that is more or less the end of the backstory that the film promised. From this point on, we're more or less running parallel to the original Sleeping Beauty film. And I had an idea in my head of what would happen. The story would play out as it did before, but the audience would know that while Maleficent was indeed truly enjoying being evil, at the heart of it, it was all out of revenge for Stefan's betrayal. That was her one true motivation. How wrong I was. Diaval brings word to Maleficent that a child has been born to King Stefan, a girl, and though initially enraged by the thought that the man who once claimed to love her has had a child with another, her wicked smile and devilish gleaming eyes soon return. So the christening party begins, and we're introduced to the three good fairies, who have come to show they bear no ill will towards the human realm and no allegiance to their self-proclaimed queen, hoping to make peace. Apparently their names are different from the original, but frankly I don't care. These characters are useless, and they are so bloody irritating all the way through the film. They're selected later on as Aurora's guardians, yet they sleep through her wails as a baby. They're thoroughly neglectful of her as she grows up, and all over serve no purpose in the telling of this story. Anyway, Maleficent crashes the party, and the playing out of this scene is practically perfect in every way, almost line for line in some instances, except this time you can feel the hatred between her and Stefan. You can see it in her eyes, and you can hear it in his voice. The fact that they gave the "you're not welcome here" line to him as opposed to the Blue Fairy worked perfectly. Then came a bit that I didn't agree with quite as much. The fact that it was Maleficent herself who provided the antidote to her own curse on Aurora. And though I understand this was also to just twist the knife of her revenge against Stefan by dangling the hope of true love's kiss, something she now believed to not exist, as the only thing to break the curse. But in the original, it was the Blue Fairy who bestowed the antidote on the child, as with the last of the three gifts, a gift which in this version she never gave. Also, Maleficent's curse in the original was that before the sun sets on her 16th birthday, she would prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die. And it was again the Blue Fairy who instead used her gift to alter the curse from death to a death-like sleep. whereas here it was Maleficent herself who said it would be a sleeping death. I can't help but feel that this not only lessened her evil in this scene, but it also took the only useful act of the good fairies away and made them utterly pointless. Now, it's been suggested that it was Maleficent's good nature winning through in an act of mercy for the innocent baby, but again, that just doesn't ring true for how she's supposed to be feeling at this time. So we all know the next bit. Stefan orders all the spinning wheels in the kingdom to be burned, the good fairies take Aurora into the woods disguised as simple, very simple, peasant women, raise her for 16 years away from Maleficent's evil, only to have a case of mistaken identity, get everything all muddled up, resulting in the curse being fulfilled, and... oh no, wait, hang on, the fairies are so useless that Diaval finds them almost immediately. And Maleficent spends the next 16 years watching over the child, in fact, on occasion, saving her from the incompetence of the fairies, preventing her from falling off a cliff. Diaval feeds and rocks the child to sleep as a baby. Aurora and Maleficent actually meet face to face when she's very young, and despite being initially disgusted by the ugly little beastie, fueled by her hatred for Stefan, as time passes she begins to warm to the child, having more and more of a presence in her life. She's still evil, and she still enjoys inflicting misery on the fairies, causing it to rain on them indoors, and snickering with glee all the while. So the essence of Maleficent's dark side is still there. But as Diaval, acting as a sort of moral compass for the villainess, drives her to do more in the child's protection, her kind-hearted side begins to win through more and more. This all culminates in the scene we all saw in the trailer of the teenage Aurora being brought into the moors, fascinating by all the wondrous creatures, before calling Maleficent out of the shadows, prompting their first fully grown encounter. The fact that Maleficent still believes herself as being scary and evil at this point makes it even more of a surprise when Aurora says that she's her fairy godmother, watching over her all through her life, always in the shadows, and Maleficent is very quick to silence her in this, perhaps being afraid that she was right, and getting her first real look at what she's allowed revenge to turn her into. A horrible thing was done to her that changed her life forever, and in response, she did what anyone in her position would have done. She took it out on those smaller and weaker than her. From seizing domination over the moors and all the little creatures therein, to unleashing her powers on a defenceless baby, all in vengeance against a man who betrayed her trust, her love, and violated her, leaving her emotionally and physically scarred. Damn it, there I go again, sympathising with Maleficent. The one thing I said I didn't want to do going into this film, but it's very difficult not to, and it's a point that I'll come back to later. Then something happens that I truly didn't anticipate. Maleficent actually tries to revoke her curse. Aurora's innocence and the time they've spent together over the last 15-odd years has won her over, and she no longer wishes to see this girl harmed because of what Stefan did to her all those years ago. And at first, I didn't like this. But in retrospect, it makes perfect sense when you consider what I just talked about, and the fact that maybe she's getting her first look at that's the truth of what's happened, but now it makes perfect sense, and I like it quite a lot. But, of course, Maleficent's curse is unbreakable even by her, and she decides that the best way to keep her safe is for Aurora to leave her worthless adopted aunts and come and live with Maleficent on the moors, safe from the curse, safe from all those incompetent fairies, and away from Stefan too, who has, while all this has been going on, slipped further and further into insanity out of guilt, denial, and paranoia of Maleficent's revenge. It's at this point that Aurora first encounters a man named Philip. You know Philip, right? No? You must do. Prince Philip, you know? No? Really? He's the prince from the original. Yeah, he had a name. And a personality, apparently. And he left such an impact on the audience at large. I mean, how long can you really go without seeing a Prince Philip cosplay at a convention? Sorry, I'm choking on my own sarcasm here. This is one of the most bland, the most boring, the most pointless characters in the history of cinema. Underdeveloped, uninteresting, unengaging. You just don't care about him. But hey, here he is, and for some reason Aurora falls in love with him, though not quite enough to put her off her new plan to leave, and she returns home to tell her aunts only for them to tell her the truth of her inheritance, and the supposed truth about Maleficent and her curse, and in another truly heart-wrenching scene, Aurora confronts her fairy godmother and turns her back on her. Now, Maleficent's reaction to this, the look in her eye and the way she cries out, "Bring me the boy!" in reference to Philip, made me think that she'd snapped again. Once again, she'd learnt to trust and even love, and without even giving her a chance to explain, Aurora had turned her back on Maleficent because of what some neglectful aunts had told her, when in truth it had been Maleficent herself watching over and caring for her all her life, and in fact she had only cursed Aurora in the first place because of what Stefan had done to her, but that she had tried to take it back, or at the very least protect her from it, but she didn't even give her a chance to explain that. And I thought that would push Maleficent over the edge, transforming her into the monster that we saw in the original. But in all honesty, the way it played out was even more dramatic. Now, Aurora returns to the castle, only to find that her father doesn't care and is more concerned with his own personal war on Maleficent than this daughter that he hasn't seen all her life, locking her away. Maleficent is bearing down on the castle with Philip in tow, but the curse begins to take effect, leading Aurora down to the dungeon where the spinning wheel graveyard is located, forming a new one, and as the sun begins to set, the curse is fulfilled, and Aurora falls into her death sleep. Devastated by what she's done, Maleficent refuses to give up, fighting her way through the castle to bring Philip to Aurora's resting place. The useless fairies think that he must be the one to break the curse, and he kisses her only to find out that nothing happens. Aurora remains sleeping. Apparently there's no such thing as true love at first sight. Love at first sight, sure, but not true love. The fairies do what they do best and leave Aurora unprotected and alone, and Maleficent looks at what she's done to this innocent child utterly heartbroken. I think the line was something along the lines of, "I will not ask you to forgive me, for what I've done to you is unforgivable, but I swear no harm will come to you as long as I live. You've stolen what remains of my heart." It was truly saddening to watch. People may criticise Angelina Jolie's acting in some films, but not this one. Every word was heartfelt. You could feel the emotion in her voice as clearly as you could see it in her eyes. Maleficent kisses Aurora's forehead, and as she looks away, Sleeping Beauty awakens, accompanied by gasps from the audience and stunned silence, and that man tear that I mentioned earlier might have come out at this point. They go to leave, but they're ambushed by Stefan and his men, and an iron chain net drops on Maleficent, trapping and burning her. And it's at this moment of the film where the part of me that wanted it to play out like the original stopped. I wanted Maleficent to live, and I wanted that scumbag to die. Dierval transforms into a dragon to defend his mistress. Good to see a dragon. Looking forward to that. While Aurora is locked away again, but stumbles across Maleficent's wings on display like some sort of sick trophy. Again, I want the scumbag to die. Things look really bad for Maleficent. She's been cornered, she's being tortured, and she's unable to fight back against Stefan's iron armour. That is until Aurora frees her wings, and they return to her, reattaching to her body and giving Maleficent her flight and her power back. Not so much her magic, but her power. Her wings return to her, and it gives her the power to defeat the man who hurt her so cruelly all those years ago. But even with this disgusting man at her mercy, Maleficent turns away from him, caring nothing for revenge anymore. She's got her life back from the man who took it all from her. And in the end, it's Stefan's own madness and his lust to prove himself dominant over her again that results in him falling to his own demise. A well-deserved end for a truly horrible character. Her wings restored, Maleficent dismantles her throne in the moors and instead proclaims Aurora as queen of both men and fairy kind, joined by Philip even though he contributed absolutely nothing. In fact, even less than the original. And the narrator, revealing herself to be Aurora, says that the kingdoms were united not by a hero or a villain, but by the one who was both hero and villain, and her name was Maleficent. Wow. What a film. That's all I have to say, just wow. This film was incredible. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. I was completely prepared for them to do their little backstory half hour at the beginning, and then weave the rest of their story around the story of the original, in a similar way to the show Wicked. That's what I was expecting. It wasn't what I wanted, but it's what I was expecting. This just blew my mind. The story was incredible. The characters, bar a few, were engaging and interesting. Any film that can make you feel genuine emotion for its characters is succeeding in drawing you into its world. I cried for Maleficent. I hated Stefan. I cared about Aurora. I respected Dierval. In every way, this film won me over. Now, it wasn't perfect, no film is. The characters of the three good fairies were a little too overplayed in their incompetence, to the point where it wasn't endearing or really very funny, they just became annoying. The character of Philip, as I've said, was even more pointless than the first time round. He only really needed to kiss her, fail to wake her, and then never be seen again. Just go. She didn't really need a prince at the end. And at times, the script was questionable. The child acting was hard to get through, but these are all minor complaints in a film that otherwise blew me out of the water. Its subtle and dark tones really hit home. The fact that Maleficent was utterly violated by this cruel and disgusting man who she trusted and loved as a means to an end on his own rise to power, and though it drove her to do horrible things out of her hatred for him, and her will to hurt him as he had hurt her, in the end she bested him not because she lived and he died, but because she saw him for what he was, and it was his own faults that led to his end. That is a storyline that I can truly get behind. It has a genuine message to give about loving, losing, being hurt, having someone you truly care about betray you, and the feeling that you just want to hurt them back more than anything. You just want them to feel like you feel. And then the moment that you get, whatever it is that comes into your life, whether it's someone else, whether it's just an own personal realization, your own personal epiphany that comes along that realizes you don't need revenge. That is a fantastic message, and one that I was not expecting from a Disney film. Frankly, this isn't a good film, it's a great film. And as such, I feel it earns itself a solid 8 on the Orsometer. This one is a must-see, and you'll never look at Sleeping Beauty the same way again. I've been Wiseman Tanofsky, this has been WMT Reviews. Thank you very much for watching.